Hey folks, this is Adam once again, aka Guy. Welcome to the Movie Vault. Back to doing another movie review. Only this time I thought I'd do a movie review on a whole new different category. I got a random question from a YouTube user the other day saying, are you a big fan of the James Bond movies? I'll get into that in just a moment. In fact, why not get to it now? I like James Bond. Okay, I'm not the biggest die-hard James Bond fanatic, but if there's a James Bond film on the TV, I'll simply watch it, especially the older ones, because I thought the older James Bond films were the best. Now, my favourite James Bond is Pierce Brosnan. Okay, the reason for that is because he was the James Bond that I grew up watching. Okay, many of you would debate that straight away, saying, no, he's not the best James Bond. Sean Connery is the best James Bond, and he acted in all the best James Bond movies. Goldfinger and all those other James Bond movies. But I like Pierce Brosnan the best as James Bond. I've seen all the films that he's been in James Bond. I've seen him in... this is my favourite James Bond movie of all time, GoldenEye. And I'll get to that in just a moment. Love him in this film, Tomorrow Never Dies. And we get to this movie, which I'm reviewing right now, also doing a slash rant on, is The World Is Not Enough. Now, I'll tell you like a bit of a background story first. When I grew up watching James Bond, I saw Pierce Brosnan in all the big hits. Like I said, I saw him in GoldenEye. I love the GoldenEye movie. In fact, that's my favourite James Bond movie. I've seen the movie GoldenEye that many times, I could act in the movie myself. Seen it countless times. I was also a massive fan of the game of the Nintendo 64. GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. I think everybody's a big fan of that game. It's got to be possibly the best game on the Nintendo 64. James Bond GoldenEye. Also starring Pierce Brosnan. But the game based on the movie, basically. Even people who are not fan of James Bond still love the game. It's a good kick-ass game, and even if you play it today, it's still a good kick-ass game. With all the selection of guns that you can get, going all through the different levels. But you're testing it like the cheat mode, going through all the levels, using all the cheats and all that kind of stuff, and completing all the missions one by one. It was a really good kick-ass game. So yeah, that's why I love GoldenEye so much. It was the one I always watched. And GoldenEye was always a game I loved playing, in my opinion, the best time of our lives in our childhood, on the Nintendo 64. The movie Tomorrow Never Dies, I think that's pretty underrated. But I'm not going to get into that movie too much because we're here to talk about The World Is Not Enough. Now, The World Is Not Enough is my least favourite James Bond film that I've seen so far. Okay, and it's my least favourite one, which stars Pierce Brosnan. Okay. Now, I've got to tell you, I've got to get more up to date with James Bond. Many of you people are saying, if I watch the old James Bond movies with Sean Connery and all the other actors, they say they are masterpieces compared to the movies that Pierce Brosnan appeared in. You're probably right. I'm a little bit behind with James Bond. I'd love to watch all the old films, catch up on all the old classics. Like The Spy Who Loved Me, The Man with the Golden Gun, so many good hits. Now, The World Is Not Enough. Like I just mentioned, it's my least favourite James Bond film. Okay. Tomorrow Never Dies came out before this one. And I think that's a better movie than The World Is Not Enough. I'll give props to the movie in some ways. There's some good special effects and there's some good stunt work. But compared to the previous James Bond movies, the movie kind of feels like it's lacking something to keep you keep you into the movie, if you get what I mean. Because, when you stick any film on, any film, it doesn't have to be a James Bond movie, it could be a horror, it could be a comedy, it could be an action. When you're watching a film, you've got to sit down and watch it all the way through with no interruptions, okay? There must never be any times throughout a movie when you sit down and watch it, you've got to answer the phone, you've got to answer the door, you've got to check your emails, you've got to go and take a piss, you've got to go and make a drink, make a snack. You shouldn't do any of that shit when you're watching any film. Films should be sitting down, watching from start to finish, not missing any scenes, etc. But The World Is Not Enough isn't like that. At least for me. At least when I watch this movie, The World Is Not Enough, There were scenes where I'd quickly pause it, take a piss, play it, pause it, check my emails, pause it, go online for about 10 minutes, then go on back on the film again, you know. So that just goes to show to me that this film is really lacking something. I mean, let me get into the characters first of all. I've got no problem with Pierce Brosnan playing the James Bond character. If we talk about, what's her name again? Denise Richards' character as Dr. Christmas Jones. Now, I personally felt, compared to all the other James Bond women, I mean, don't get me wrong, she's beautiful and all that, but I feel like her character had like less something to do in this movie. I mean, it's like as if her only purpose in this movie was to disarm bombs. You know, and there's even a scene in this movie where James Bond tells not to disarm a bomb. You know, so she's just disarming bombs throughout the movie. And you're thinking to yourself, James Bond could have easily got through this whole adventure without using Dr. Christmas Jones. You know, so it feels like if the Dr. Christmas Jones character was deleted, it wouldn't have hurt the movie. So, apart from disarming bombs, I wish she had like so more of something to do. You know, like she served a better purpose compared to all the other James Bond women who have helped James Bond throughout the whole films. Dr. Christmas Jones, like I said, I've got no arguments about her being pretty. You know, she's very pretty, but compared to all the women, I felt like she didn't really like serve much of a purpose. And if a character got erased from the movie, it wouldn't have hurt the movie at all. Okay, and then we get to other characters like Sophie McHugh, played Electra King, the oil heiress. You know, she's got like this oil pipeline business, you know, that she's trying to protect, that all the bad guys are after. Again, beautiful villain. You know, the boat chase scene was like kind of interesting. There was some good stunt work there, like how the boat's getting on land. She's taking a shortcut to get to the big hot air balloon before it blows up and all that kind of stuff. So some good stunt work. There's that seductive scene where she's got James Bond tied to the chair, you know, and she's kissing him and like slowly tightening the lock, you know, to choke James Bond like in that torture chair. You know, so she did a good job of being seductive and evil at the same time. You know, no complaints there in that department. One character I do want to talk about is the Renard character, played by Robert. I can't know if I spell that correctly. Sarlisle, yeah. Basically, his character can't feel any pain after getting a bullet through the brain. Now, I wish they would have really gone with that a little bit more, about him not being able to feel pain. I mean, I know there's a scene like where he holds this red hot rock, you know, and his hand is burning and he can't feel any pain or anything. There's a scene where he like punches into some nails, you know, and he says he can't feel pain and all that kind of shit. But I mean, I mentioned it, don't get me wrong, but again, I wish they really got into that a little bit more, you know, throughout the whole film. I wish they they really told more about it, told a more bigger story about how it all happened and all that kind of stuff. You know, another scene in this movie, we get like a jet skiing scene, so like a skiing scene, ice skiing scene. Like these guys are like coming from these balloons on these skis, you know, to chase James Bond and Christmas, you know. And I chuckled a little bit at that part. I'm thinking to myself, is this scene meant to be funny? Because it kind of feels like it's like a parody scene from Austin Powers, you know what I mean? I was like, was that really needed in a James Bond movie? They could have filled it in with much more better scenes than that. Back to the boat chase scenes. I've seen better boat chase scenes in better movies. I mean, take the boat chase scene in Face Off, for example, which stars John Travolta. Those were epic boat scenes. I mean, you kind of expect to see those kind of boat scenes in a James Bond movie, particularly in a movie like this. You know, and I know I've rambled on a bit about talking about how I'm disappointed with some scenes, how scenes could be better, how certain characters could be eliminated. But that's how I generally feel about The World Is Not Enough. I mean, I'm not saying it's a disastrous movie, but it's definitely not an epic movie either. I'm just saying it's just one of those movies that could have been a little bit better. It's definitely not better than Tomorrow Never Dies. and it certainly is not much better than GoldenEye. I mean, even take the ending, for example, you know, where James Bond is, like, doing those underwater scenes, you know, into, like, going into that marine. I mean, that's a similar scene that we saw in Tomorrow Never Dies, and I thought Tomorrow Dies was much more better than this movie. And I'm thinking they're doing this again, you know, another underwater scene with, like, some sort of marine. Sorry, like a submarine. And I'm like, we've seen this, you know, but it was like redone again, but redone kind of amateur, like the next level down. You know, I mean, again, it was one of those piss break movies, you know, where you just like pause it, play it, pause it, play it. While you're watching the film, you're like, it's going on a little bit, but it doesn't like really draw your brain like directly into the movie like all the previous James Bond movies. You know what I mean? So, again, it's just not one of those movies that I'd highly recommend watching at the James Bond bunch when you've got like these other great films like Tomorrow Never Dies, GoldenEye. You know, I'd be much more into talking about these movies than, you know, The World Is Not Enough, basically. It's my least favourite James Bond movie that I've seen so far. Could be the worst. I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's some other movies out there which are considered some really poor James Bond movies, but I've just not had the time to check those out. But, again, I'm not arguing with the stunt work. I'm not arguing with the effects. You know, there was some good scenes that I did like in this movie. But all I'm saying is when you compare them to the previous James Bond movies, they're not as good. That's all I'm saying. You know, I'm not bashing the movie. I've stated the good points. I've stated the bad points. You know, I've stated they could have done a little bit more with the characters, you know, especially with Christmas's character, you know, how they could have used her a little bit more other than disarming bombs, because James Bond could have pretty much done all the work all on his own, you know, disarming the bombs and all that. It was like kind of like the character was just basically just thrown in, you know. Again, you got the whole thing with the pipeline, the bad guys are after it, James Bond is trying to stop it and all that kind of stuff, so, I don't know what more else I can say about The World Is Not Enough. In fact, when I think about The World Is Not Enough, I think I saw it for the first time in cinema when I was like when I was like a teenager. You know, every time when a James Bond movie came out starring Pierce Brosnan, I had to go to the cinema to see it. Because he was my favourite Bond. He was the Bond that I watched growing up, and I just had to see the Bond movie. And I do remember seeing The World Is Not Enough, and I do remember enjoying it a little bit more better back then. I think it was because it was the first time I was watching it, and I was like only a kid back then. But when I just bought it on Blu-ray and rewatched it, I kind of thought to myself, you know, what did I like about this movie so much? I definitely don't like it as much as I did now than I did back then, you know. So that's basically my review, everybody. I mean, I will state some more facts about this movie. Like I say, I've just given my overall opinion. Not my favourite James Bond movie. There's definitely better ones than this one. Reception-wise, they got a mixed reception. It has several release dates. I mean, yeah, 1999 when it was released in the United Kingdom. In fact, the official release date was 26th of November of 1999. The 19th of November of 1999 in the United States. At the Los Angeles premiere, the 8th of November of 1999. Again, it's a 128-minute long movie. You know, I felt like the movie was going on forever. And that's a long movie to watch when you're taking several piss breaks in between, even though you didn't need a fucking piss break, you know what I mean? So, directed by Michael Apted. Yeah. So, yeah, 1999. It felt like it came out much later than that, like in 2000 or 2001, but yeah, 1999 it came out of this, and like I said, it had different release dates for different countries. So, alright, everyone. If I do review another James Bond film in the near future, it's definitely going to be one that I like a little bit more, so I can have more to talk about, like GoldenEye or Tomorrow Never Dies. I'll be much more into like reviewing those movies than compared to this one, you know. And I really must check the other James Bond movies out, because like I say, I don't mind the James Bond movies. I wouldn't mind checking out Sean Connery's work, you know. Again, I'm not the biggest diehard James Bond fan, but on a rainy day, I would like to check out some of the old classics, you know, find out what I've been missing. So, Please like, rate, and comment this, everybody, and email if you've got any questions. Peace out.